Alright, so today we'll be continuing our study of equations and inequalities, and we'll be doing so with inequalities involving absolute values. So, when we have an absolute value that is equal to a, then that means that our x is going to be plus or minus a. And this you should already know because we know that when we have an absolute value, it will turn any positive value into a positive value and any negative value into a negative value. So let's say I had absolute value of a, well then that just becomes a. Or if I had, say, the absolute value of minus a, then what my absolute value does is it gets rid of this negative, so this will also become a. So as you can see, either a or negative a will solve this equation. And so another thing we do with absolute values is if the absolute value is less than a, this means that it's going to be between negative a and a for our x. And if our absolute value is greater than a, that means that x is going to be less than negative a and x is going to be greater than a. So we can use these in some examples. So let's go over a few. First of all, we have the absolute value of x is greater than 2. So now there's two cases that we have to be considering when we do this. The first case is that x is positive. And if x is positive, then that means that our positive x is going to be greater than 2. Because if x is positive, then the absolute value of x is just going to be equal to x, which means that this is true. So we know that x would be greater than 2. But, so this is case 1. But we also have to consider the case, which is case 2, that x might not be positive. So that would mean that we would actually have a negative x. And so if we have a negative x and we want to solve for possible x values, we have to consider what happens when x is negative. Well, if x is negative, then we get a negative x is greater than 2. And so we want to solve this. So if we rearrange this, we have to move this negative to the other side, and we can do that by multiplying both sides by negative 1. Because there's a little 1 in front of our x and between our minus that we're not writing. So if we multiply both sides by negative 1, then we get x and negative 2. Is this going to be greater than? Well, it's actually not, because whenever we multiply or divide by a negative number, we have to flip the inequality. So when we flip the inequality, we get that x is less than negative 2. And this is the exact rule that we just learnt about. So this means that x is greater than 2 and x is less than minus 2. And so that rule that we just learned about, that's exactly how we do it. So you can just do it by considering case 1 and by considering case 2. All right. So with this example, that's exactly what we did. We considered case 1 to get our positive and case 2 to get our negative, and that gives us these two solutions. So if we draw that on a number line, then we can get 2 and negative 2. And our x is going to be greater than 2 and less than negative 2. So now let's consider our other example, which is slightly harder. So we have the absolute value of 2y minus 1 is less than 5. So again, we still have the two situations, one in which the thing inside of our absolute value is positive, and the other where it is negative. So if we consider case 1, where it's positive, then we just get 2y minus 1 is less than 5, because that's going to be positive, so the absolute value doesn't matter. And that then gives us 2y is less than 6 by adding 1 to both sides. And that gives us that y is less than 3. And we get that by dividing both sides by 2. So now let's consider case 2. And so if we consider case 2, that means the thing inside of the absolute value is going to be negative. And if the thing inside of the absolute value is going to be negative, then we can write that like this. So 2y minus 1 is less than 5. So now let's move this negative over to begin with. And we get 2y minus 1 and minus 5, but we have to flip that inequality again because we're multiplying by negative 1. And now we just rearrange. So we add 1 to both sides, so we get 2y is greater than minus 4. and then we divide both sides by 2, so we get y is greater than minus 2. And so that means that y is less than 3, but greater than minus 2. And notice that in all of these, I've used less than and greater than, but not equal to, because that's what the two inequalities are. Neither of them have the equal to. And so again, this is the same expression we saw earlier, where if our absolute value is less than a constant, then we get an expression where it's in between two values for our solution. So if we draw this one on a number line up here, then we can have minus 2 and 3, and we know that it's going to be less than minus 2, but greater than minus 2, but less than 3, so we get in between this region. And also over here, these should both have open circles because they're not equal to. So whenever we're dealing with inequalities and have absolute values, we have to make sure that we consider two cases. One, where the inequality is positive, and the other, where the inequality is negative. And from there, we can just rearrange normally, and we'll get two solutions, and we can either combine them to make this one line, or keep them separate and have these two solutions. And that is basically the gist of inequalities and absolute values. I hope this lesson was helpful, and I'll see you guys next time.